Jake Bruton with Aarow Building in Columbia, Missouri, and today we're at our Spring Valley project, and we're going to be having a conversation that I have all the time with clients, and that conversation is, what is the best insulation? And I think after you watch this video, you'll understand that that's not an easy answer, or that's not an easy question to answer. But today we're going to talk to Steve Reamer of G5 Enterprises, and let's get our conversation started. This is going to be interesting. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jake.
Okay, so you're with G5 Enterprises.
Yes, sir.
And G5 for us here in Columbia is represented by Bolivar Insulation.
Correct.
In other parts of the state, it's other things like Insul USA, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Basically, we've got 13 branches. Most of them are based in Missouri, but we expand into Kansas, Oklahoma, down into Arkansas. We've got Arkansas Insulation that is in Springdale,
Okay.
Rogers, another one in Harrison, and we've got locations all over Missouri, Joplin, Kansas City,
Okay.
and Nixa, where our corporate
So
is.
you guys
we
cover a
we
large
cover a
market,
large- yes.
and you're a fairly decent sized company.
Oh, yes.
And you've been in the insulation business for how long?
I installed my first bat in 1977.
Okay.
So a while.
So Steve's been around insulation for a while. And that's actually where we'll start in just a second is with bats too. So
Okay.
it's funny that you said it like that. We wanted to talk just real quick. The idea behind this is, what is the best insulation is not an easily answered question. The answer to that is, it depends.
It depends
right?
on it depends on what you have to accomplish.
Okay.
Absolutely. And your budget.
Yep. And so we'll talk about both from a budget standpoint and from a utility for like this project, because we're here on the Spring Valley project. Let's just start with Stebrick and Building Science Corporation's rule for a net zero house, or for the point of, sorry, how am I trying to say this? The point where things become less a return on investment. You know, the point where you should stop putting more insulation in and focus on other things.
Right.
And that rule is 10, 20, 40, 60, and 5. And that's 10 underneath your slab, which is what we have here, 20 on any foundation walls, 40 on any walls above grade, 60 in the attic, and then windows or doors that are at least an R5. And so here we're 10 under our feet. We don't have any below grade walls. We have a combination of things that we'll discuss in a minute about what's happening in our wall, and this is roughly an R42. We went to an R70 in the attic, and we'll talk about why we went above that 60 point. And then we're at R9 or R7 to R9 glass, depending on function of the unit. So we're really adhering to that paper from Stebrick and that idea that Building Science Corporation puts forward. And that's also a product of Steve Basic, our architect, used to work for Building Science Corporation and now adheres to some of those same philosophies, because those philosophies we think are true. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the conversation about insulation, after we know what our proportions might be for something like this, yes, we can talk about code, which in our market, Climate Zone 4 is an R19 mm-hmm. For walls, and I believe an R40?
R38.
No, it's 38.
Well, you
Yep.
may be 40 here.
And so there's different ways to get to there. The code doesn't read, put this kind of insulation in. The code reads, put this much R value in. And so the conversation should start with R value once we have that beginning out of the way. So talk to us a little bit about what R value means and how that applies to the things that we're going to talk about.
Well, basically, R value is the effective way that insulation stops heat flow through it. It's a resistance factor, is how they name it. So basically, it's set up in a plexiglass box with a light bulb underneath it, and they transfer heat through it, and that's how you tell what the R factor is of a product. There are people that are trying to work on a different factor to come up with something that's more real world, you might say, okay. Because just the fact that it stops heat moving through it in a encased box mm-hmm. isn't real world.
Yeah.
We've all got air movement outside, air movement inside a wall cavity, so that will reduce the R factor.
We may have soffit eaves that are letting things, the
Exactly.
wind rush in through our assembly.
Exactly. And inside a wall, you've got, air that's cold that's dropping, and then it's rising on the inside where you're closer to the drywall. So when it starts looping like that, it will reduce the R factor in products that are fibrous that you can move air through. So, but they're all good products. It just depends on what you have backing them up and the whole system that they're built into. But that's basically what an R factor is the effective way that it can resist heat transfer.
And that's literally what the R in R value stands for. It's just its ability to resist the movement of heat
Correct.
through it. So we have laid out in front of us here, and we'll just go through them like one by one. We're not promoting one thing over the other. We'll talk a little pro and con about each one. We may talk about environmental impact on some of this stuff, but we're gonna pick and choose, and we'll just start with the one thing that you mentioned already, and that would be bat insulation. You said 1978, is that what you said? 76?
Right. 77.
Okay. So this product is a fiberglass bat. A lot of it is pink, a lot of it is yellow. Those colors don't mean anything other than marketing, right?
It's the manufacturer.
Yep.
That's their mark.
And so I grew up with the Pink Panther and with Owens Corning pink. And so it's one of those things that when I think fiberglass, I think pink. I don't think of anything else. You can get this faced with a vapor retarder on it, and you can get it unfaced. You can get fiberglass in anything from a 2x4 cavity to your attic space, and you can get it from R13 all the way to 38. Have you ever seen higher than 38?
We have installed some R49 bats.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see there's a wide versatility with this product. Talk to me about grading of insulation, Steve. The install.
The install?
Yeah.
Okay. Typically HERS raters in a lot of locations, they are required to inspect housing after the insulation is done. Grade 1 basically is no compressions, no gaps. All your cuts have to be perfect around all of the outlets. It's difficult to do with a fiberglass bat, but it's possible. It takes a lot of additional labor to make sure that you have good cuts, that you either separate the bat and tuck it behind your wiring, or make a cut across it and try and get that back together. That's one of the products that it's difficult to get a grade 1 without spending a lot of labor time, which, insulation's one of those budget items that people have to build around. And so if we spend a lot of labor time making it perfect, it begins to push it into another layer of insulation that we can do that is easier to do than make all the cuts in the fiberglass.
So we might be able to spend more money on a different product and get the same quality of insulation by spending less on labor.
Correct.
And so the system for fiberglass is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Grade 1 is a perfect install, like you were saying.
Right.
Everything's cut and fit tightly. The bat is allowed to decompress and expand, because the R value rating that you're getting is not an R value when it's mashed down. It's at the full depth of the cavity, or the full depth of the intended depth of the product.
Basically what's doing the insulating is the amount of air that this bat can hold.
The void.
Right.
The void that doesn't seem like it's there.
So if it's
but
compressed, there's not much air at my fingers.
Yeah.
When it's like that, it can hold a lot of air, and that's what does the insulation. When a guy installs a bat in a wall and he pushes it down the sides and compresses those edges, that's what they're talking about on compression, that they don't want to see that. So, all the bats have to be completely out. A lot of times they face staple that product in, so the tabs are outside so that it can have its full its full expansion
volume.
Wall cavity.
So I was talking to one of the R&D guys at Owens Corning a few years ago at a conference, and one of the things that he said to me was, if you think about where you cut around every single box, there's 30 outlets in that wall, and there's 15 switches, and if any of them, if I can put my thumb in without touching fiberglass, I've compromised 12 inches, a radius around my thumb of 12 inches.
Right.
So that to me says, while we talk about ease of installation, it comes in a bat, you can fluff it and stick it in the wall and it's done. It also means that it's a complicated product to get right.
Correct.
Or more complicated than some probably to get right.
Certainly more labor intensive.
Okay. And so this is like our first step. This is the first insulation that I installed as well. If we go from there, the next step up, let's go to bat. So even though there's a couple other products here, let's talk about another version of bat. Okay. And this happens to be what?
This is a rock wool or a thermal fiber bat that is basically where your fiberglass bat is sand or melted, melted sand, melted glass that's spun out. This is just made out of slag rock, a little heavier duty rock. It has a higher melting temperature. So they use this product a lot more so in fire safing than they do, just from a thermal standpoint.
Because it's made of rocks, we don't have to worry about it catching fire.
Correct. Well, you don't have to worry about fiberglass catching fire either. It will melt sooner than this will. But this is a heavy bat. I mean, you can tell the difference just in the weight of this, little over square foot section that we've got here.
And so
the density is a lot more.
When we're still talking about bats, I raised this one up because I wanted to have the moisture conversation and the fire conversation too.
Okay.
That when we're talking about moisture in the wall, we're not talking about bulk water. Nothing we're going to talk about here is going to perform greatly if you have water running down the inside of your wall.
Right.
We're talking about incidental moisture that is small amounts carried by air or occasional seasonal wetting, due to condensation. So when we're talking about that, and we're talking bats first, this guy is not going to be bothered by water or fire because it's made of rocks.
Right.
This guy is going to be pretty darn resistant to water.
Yes.
But it's not designed to be underwater. Like we just said, it's not bulk water.
Right.
After we talk about bats, we go to a blown-in product, and let's note those, and then we'll talk about their ability to control moisture. Okay. So first we have fiberglass. So this is the same product as that? Is that correct?
This is Insul Safe. Basically, this is what they call a virgin wool. Okay. It doesn't have any binder in it, which the binder is what makes this bat stay together. So you can take this and rub it on your face, rub it on your hands.
It's not going to be itchy.
It's not going to itch like your standard fiberglass does. This is specifically made for blown-in insulation. You can tell the difference in the fibers of it, that it doesn't have any.
It almost breaks apart on purpose, is what you're saying.
Right. So it doesn't have the binder that this product is, so it's easily blown.
And so this comes in a bag. They dump it in our market.
Right.
Bolivar dumps it into a hopper in a truck, and then they run pipe into the house like an enormous garden hose.
Right.
And somebody sprays this either in a netted wall, a netted ceiling, or in the attic.
Just in an attic, correct.
Okay. And so its ability to deal with moisture is exactly the same, basically, as fiberglass.
Right. It can be blown in the walls and in ceilings, netted ceilings, tighter than this, to where it will have a greater density than this, so it will.
So that thumb around the outlet problem is not going to exist with the blown-in product.
Right, because it can just be blown tighter up against all of the outlets. It is. You're using more product, so you are, naturally you're spending more money on that. But it is a good product like that. It's still a fibrous product. The air infiltration rate would be less on that than what the fiberglass would. So you're beginning to get to a point where you're stopping more air through it than what you can with the fiberglass bat. And
air can move pretty freely through this. It's surprisingly the amount. We've done demo where there's dirt on the inside of the bat where there's been a split in the bat, and air's just traveling through.
Correct.
And carrying all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, if you do many demos, you look around the perimeter of those bats and they're dirty. They're just brown. Yeah. And that's from the dirt that's coming in around it. So it's a great filter, but it is a filter. But like I said, in its correct condition, it works. It does prevent heat flow. Yeah.
Don't take any of the negativity that we might add or attach to any of these to be not a recommendation. They all have their place. So next, you can even see the dust come off of that one. this is a product called cellulose, and it looks to me like that's newspaper. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so in our market, cellulose and blown fiberglass are probably interchangeable. We're going to use them in all the same spots, right?
They are. You can use cellulose to dense pack a wall just the same way that you would with this fiberglass. Loose fill, blow it in an attic. There is little difference in R factor between them in those attic situations. You do have to blow more inches of fiberglass than you do of cellulose to get up to your R38 or R40, but in an attic, you've got, limited inches. I mean, unlimited inches almost.
So you're not constrained by the space of the wall cavity, say in an attic, so you can just dump as much in as you want.
Correct. When you start dense packing both of these materials, you end up with an R factor that's within 2 or 3 of each other.
Okay. So they're pretty comparable across the board. This product being, they call it cellulose, if you remember from like high school science class. The trees are made of, plants are made of cellulose.
Correct.
And so this in the past has been made from sawdust. It's been made from all sorts of things that were always started as a plant. They always have been organic. They've always started as a plant. So my question is, this is recycled content, but if this is just recycled newspaper and we use it in our wall and we have a little bit of incidental moisture like we were just talking about, why doesn't this just turn to mold? Why doesn't it just rot?
It has chemical in it, so it won't.
Okay.
But it also, once it gets wet and the air holding capacity changes. I don't want to say paper mache. I did say paper mache. You kind of end up with that.
Yeah.
It fills in those air holes when you take wet newspaper and compress it.
Yep.
It doesn't have as much capacity to hold air anymore and do the insulating that you need it to do.
Okay.
Because it's not.
So while it's recycled content, they're also stuffing it full of chemicals and borate specifically, right? To keep it from molding or mildewing, which it's inert. Once it's in the wall and you're not touching it and you're not consuming it, it's not going to bother you at all.
Right.
Most of these have some downside for the stuff that they have.
Oh, absolutely. And we all want to believe that our walls are going to be dry and that we have, little moisture that goes through them. It's not cellulose's fault that we get moisture inside a wall. It's what we've done to control the moisture to it. But if that happens, then it becomes a material that's really difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
To have to get that out.
And they can blow that wet and they can blow that dry.
Correct.
What's the benefit of blowing it wet?
Benefit of blowing it wet is you don't have to put up a net.
Okay, so I can come in.
You can come
today.
in and spray it in place right there. So it will stick in place until you hang your drywall. One key factor that you need to pay close attention to is that you make sure that material dries down to a certain percentage before you start covering it up.
Okay, so we're monitoring it.
Yeah, you may need to leave it uncovered for 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
To make sure that the moisture content is low enough to cover it up and lock it in the wall.
So then from a production builder standpoint, maybe the thing to do is net and blow it dry. That way you can have workers the next day on site hanging things.
Right.
And that's one of those I'm always thinking about, what does the production schedule look like? So after we talk about bats and we talk about blown in, oh, by the way, you can also get mineral wool or rock wool in a blown form. We just don't have anybody, a blown in place form.
Right.
It's a little more difficult on the machines. It wears and tears.
And on the person that's blowing it.
But again, you get the benefits of those two blown in place products mixed with its rocks. It's not going to catch on fire. No moisture is going to bother it. It's a little harder to come by, so we don't have any of it here. So after we talk about bats and blown in, we start talking about sheet goods. And there are multiple different kinds. I would say that also there is a mineral wool product that comes in large sheets that you see a lot for exterior application that we don't have here as well. And again, it's rocks, so it's not going to be bothered for being outside. So we have 3 different kinds of board insulation here. We have polyiso, XPS, and EPS. Run me through a little bit of what the difference in these products is.
Basically, it's the chemical makeup of them. Polyiso would have the highest R factor of these. It needs to have this product in place on it, the sheathing on each side of it, or the skin on it.
Yep.
So it doesn't start to, decompose. But this is it's a great product, typically used above grade. You can't get moisture inside that.
It starts to lose R value and integrity
when you get it
below.
When you get it below grade, and,
Yep.
and when you get it wet. So now, I mean, there are people that are using this product below grade inside homes, on the inside of
Yep.
foundation walls, and
Yep.
it's a good product for that. But it does have a good high R factor.
And this is like a R6.5 per inch.
Correct.
So this is like an R13 and 2 inches here.
Right.
And then the XPS.
XPS is just extruded polystyrene. These two are closer in families together. This has an R5
Yep.
per inch. Used typically, it has a lot more compressive strength than what this product does. So from putting it on the exterior of a foundation and then backfilling against it, it will withstand that, where this product wouldn't do that. This is
approved for below grade?
correct.
Okay.
Correct. Basically, your expanded is basically what you consider for your coolers.
Yep. Or coffee cup.
Call it beadboard.
Yep.
It's just, it's a lot of little beads of expanded polystyrene there. Less R factor, not as conducive to, compressive strength on it. It will dent. So not like this product, but it's as far as exterior use below grade, I don't see many guys use it on the exteriors. They put it under slabs, stuff like that.
And so when you talk about all three of these products, these are all petroleum based. They're all in that family. And it's my understanding that the polyiso is probably considered the most eco-friendly from a blowing agent standpoint. So in their manufacturing process, they aerate the product. They shove air into it, just like we were talking about with the other things. But they do that by introducing a blowing agent in the manufacturing process. And while these two are on their way to being way more eco-friendly, in the United States they're not yet. And the polyiso is probably the best from an environmental impacts. We've used the EPS, and the EPS is an interesting conversation because you say it dimples, but at the same time we can order different kinds of EPS that have different compaction rates.
Densities.
Yeah, so this is actually a type 9. It's a 20 psi, which, if you extrapolate that out, that's more weight than any house is going to have on it per square foot. The interesting thing about this, the Type 9 specifically, it's what they put under heated runways. And if you've ever seen them building up on-ramps to build a ramp across a highway, that's what they use as backfill. Because they can get a lot of space with high compression quickly, cover it with dirt. They know this isn't going to biodegrade being underground. And they're able to really use this in a lot of interesting ways that when I cut it and it comes apart like a broken up coffee cup that I used to play with at the baseball field or the softball field when my sister played softball. It's weird to think that move has gone that far. So these sheet goods, mostly in our market, you're going to see them inside. There is some ability to do exterior foam, and we'll talk about exterior at the very end. We'll talk here about what we have here. And so after we talk about these, we're on to spray foams.
Right.
And so again, there's an environmental conversation that everything on this half of the table is probably not as good for the environment just from a manufacturing standpoint. There's an argument to be made one way or the other in the long term of, well, if this house uses a lot less energy, maybe that's better for the environment if we have, So we could go back and forth on that, but when we're talking about spray foam, the interesting thing that I think is really interesting about spray foam, this is a product that's manufactured here. Not here in the state of Missouri, I mean here.
Manufactured on site.
It's manufactured on site. The rest of these are all taken care of and shipped to us, and all we have to do is install them properly. These come in chemical form and we have to mix it and put it on the wall. Now, the gun sprays it out, right? Do you want to talk to us about the process for spray foam?
Sure.
I'm going to cut in right here and say that the conversation with our insulator was so good and the content was so great. This video is actually only about halfway over. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to just pick a point and splice here. And next week will be part 2. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned for next week for part 2.